Let me still have a few people rolling in. Okay. I'm just downloading those submissions that you guys had. And then what we'll do is we'll just we'll popcorn around, and everybody will kind of like do a little bit of a presentation of your depth of field, kind of explain a little bit if you had any issues or what you were attempting or trying to do, and then I'll give you feedback based on what I see, and then we'll do that for everyone. And then we'll go on to the next. So this is just downloading, and then all right. Cool. Well, let me see. I have all this thing downloaded. Let me just make sure everyone's here. Okay, so I'm just gonna go in the order that I have everything downloaded. Okay, so first up is last names first. I believe Maddie.
Hi.
Hello. All right, so I have your document here. Share my screen. Can everybody see?
Yes.
All right, so first thing I want to touch on is just the submission itself. You'll see as we go through the other ones, and I think we need to look at like the process, potentially the exporting process or the last step with Adobe Acrobat. Because what we want to have is your shots. So this is a version of like a contact sheet, but what we want to have is in this particular assignment, there was 12 photos that we wanted to have as selects, just individually on each page be a photo, because 2 shots per like situation that you took a photo of. So yeah, so I just want to think about, did you have trouble in that process or like export process? What was your process or experience with this assignment?
It was getting the images to download in the right version so that I could upload them from, because my computer doesn't it doesn't have a memory card. So like I have to use my mother's computer to insert the chip into the computer and then download it from there and then email it to myself. And then I can start it on my own computer. So I usually download them as like JPEGs and stuff like that. So
I see. So what type of computer do you have?
It's a Lenovo PC.
So does it have any ports at all? USB ports or anything?
It has USB ports, but I don't have a connector, so I just use the.
So I think these files are really big, and the emailing and downloading, it just makes your process a lot longer. I would get an adapter. It's like $20 on Amazon. Here's one, I have one. There's a bunch of cords connected to it, but it has the SD card slot as well as other things that you can use to plug in other USB ports, extensions, and all that jazz. I think that would be the best bet. And also moving forward in the future, just like if your computer doesn't have like memory card slots or sometimes the laptops have minimal ports, it's just a good thing to have as a resource. So a USB adapter, it sounds like yours has USB 3. The standard USB and not the like newer, slimmer USB port. But yeah, that would be my suggestion to like, because the process is already multi-layered, and I think by doing that, you're just adding more complication to it. And then, like I said, you'll see when we go through the other assignments, I'll point out the ones that are kind of in the format that we're looking to get to, and then kind of review that. So that's just that note. I would definitely suggest getting the adapter for the actual SD card. The other note is that just looking at your shots, it's a little bit hard to see, but I think you're getting there with switching your apertures. I do see one thing changing is your exposure changes, and that is a result that does happen with closing your aperture to get everything in focus around you. And then when you open up your aperture, you get a brighter photo because you get more light. The one thing I want to caution though is shooting plants and flowers. It's difficult to achieve one of those 4 things on that list that we went over last week, which is a sense of simplicity. Inherently, flowers and plants have a lot going on, meaning they have a lot of lines, shapes, textures, going in many different directions. And so it's difficult oftentimes to shoot a simple photo. It's a colorful photo, but the simplicity is not there. And so your camera actually even struggles to know what to focus on because there's so much in the frame. So I would actually suggest shooting a different subject other than, for right now, as we're starting out, other than flowers and plants, because so you can actually practice the techniques with and not have to have so many elements fighting against you, which in the case of shooting the bouquets, there's just lines going everywhere and shapes going everywhere, and the stems create lines that the camera tries to decide between, especially when you have a lot of greens. It's hard for the camera to differentiate the greens and things like that. So that's kind of my main note. And then we'll look at the export process just to make sure that you're getting the shots out so that we can see the photos bigger. That's the main goal, to see the technique. But on your end, how did you feel shooting and adjusting the aperture?
It's not like the easiest thing to do going back and forth, because you have to like take the picture, double check if the aperture is right, and then go back and refix it if needed, which happened a couple times. It's not something that is like super first nature for me yet. So it did take a lot of time to take the first photo, make sure the aperture and everything is correct, and you can see the image. So like this took like several hours to do, just because I'm not super like knowledgeable about the equipment. And then it was like more me trying to get the same image twice. Like that was was a little bit more harder, was like double checking the image the first time and then repositioning myself the second time and then going back and double checking that the photo was the same photo the second time, like same placement and everything.
Yeah, I mean, that sounds about right. I mean, I said to shoot 6 subjects. It looks like you shot a little bit more, but I think just looking at it, one thing I can note is that when you do open your aperture larger, which the number gets smaller, so you put your f-stop at 3.5, what happens is if you look at this top row, you bring more light into your camera. So one general rule of thumb is that when your aperture is the widest open or the lowest f-stop number, which is 3.5, or some of you I think have a different lens, you're gonna need to bring your shutter speed faster. So just, it's kind of this scale. Like if your aperture is bigger opened, then your shutter speed needs to go faster. So because you're bringing more light in with the bigger opening in the lens. And so that's why if you notice your top row of all these shots, they're brighter and some of them overexposed. And so that's just a kind of like have in your head, and for everybody else in the class, if you have a wider open aperture, generally you need to have a faster shutter speed to even out the light that's coming into the camera. So that's one note that I can give. But I think the process, I mean, you know, that process that you mentioned of going back and forth, checking the camera, that's kind of the process that you have to do until you get used to kind of seeing the scene and then kind of generalizing what settings that you should have to make that scene work and make that scene properly exposed. So cool. I think nothing out of the ordinary as far as your experience. I think that that's at this point what I could expect from the assignment. So good work. We'll take a look at the export process and kind of get that down packed. And then, yeah, like I said, if you can, I'd suggest getting the adapter for the computer so you have some more ports. Cool. All right. Let's look at the next one. And guys, as I'm going through everybody's, you know, I'm giving everybody notes on yours individually, but I think the notes travel and relate to everyone and as you're shooting. So definitely pay attention to some of the things I'm saying, because some of the things are gonna apply over and over again to each person's, because I have looked at scrolled through the the submissions, and there are some things that will kind of repeat themselves. Okay. Next up is, let's see if on. Yeah, Jordan.
Hi.
Hello. Okay. All right. So overall, just quick, how was the shooting assignment? Was it horrible? Did you pull your hair out? Was it okay? Just yeah, give me some feedback.
It wasn't too bad. It was a little difficult, like constantly having to change like the shutter speed and ISO every time I changed the aperture. And in some of like the first photos, I don't think I changed my aperture high enough, like the f-stop number high enough, because like the whole photo was still a little blurry. Like there was some changes that you could tell, but when I looked at them on the computer afterwards, I noticed that they were a little blurrier, because I think I only changed it to like 5.0. And then in some of my later ones, I changed it to like 20 and they came out a lot better.
Okay, when you change, we'll take a look at it, but
Yeah.
when you change it to 20, you probably had to shoot with a pretty slow shutter speed, huh? And a high ISO.
Mhm.
Yeah. I think you probably would have been seeing some changes maybe around 8 or 11. But we'll take a look. We'll scroll through.
Yeah.
So this shot is your intention was shallow depth of field, right? With this shot. Yeah. And we can see that down here as we go to the back of the frame. This stuff gets blurry and less sharp. And then the Yamaha right here in the front of the frame is super sharp. So we can see that there. Let's keep going. And actually, I do see the change here. I think one of the things is that the back of your frame, especially with the certain angles that you take, you might always get blur, but what you can see here is the gas cans, I think, or even the race performance right here. When on this one, we clearly can't read, we can't read race performance clearly. But when you shift to your wide depth of field, we can read race performance. And so even at switching to 5 f-stop, you do get a lot more clarity across the frame. It doesn't go all the way necessarily to the tree, all the way in the back, because that's really far anyways. But we can see here on our subject, we see some more things in focus. So hopefully the whole class can see that. Hopefully my share screen, is my share screen crisp enough? Or hopefully for most people, it's crisp. We can see that shift between race performance being blurry and then race performance being crisp. So the crisp race performance, this is an example of wide depth of field, and this is an example of shallow depth of field. So just so everybody can relate what to what those are. All right, so let's just scroll through some more.
Did you say you would go through exporting again today? I don't know why, like I did it differently than you wanted last week, and I'm trying to figure out how to get them up in a way that you want?
Yeah, we're gonna have an in-class shooting assignment, and then we're gonna try to go through that export process again one more time today. So let's take a look at these. Which one of these would you say, Jordan, is a shallow depth of field, or that you were trying?
I think the second one was I was trying to do more shallow depth of field,
Okay.
but when I looked at the photos, the first one, like the truck was still blurry and super bright. So
Yeah, so this situation is what we call a backlit situation. So
Mhm.
the light source is coming into the lens behind the subject. So you're
Mhm.
gonna get your background will be in a backlit situation, the background will be overexposed. I
Mhm.
do see the shift though. The truck is more blurry in this shot. This shot, the truck has a little bit more detail through the spokes of the bike tire.
Mhm.
But it is going to be difficult because the exposure, the overexposure, the
Mhm.
blown out nature of the background is fighting your even seeing any blur,
Yeah.
period, right? And so if depending on the lenses, if you have a better lens, you actually would be able to create shallow depth of field just on the strut, the fork of the bike, and the actual bike hub itself,
Mhm.
by getting closer. But you would need a lens that actually could potentially have an f-stop of a lower number, like
Mhm.
2.8 or 1.4, and you would actually be able to see the difference right here within these elements that are in the frame. But yeah, so good attempt. I think just the lighting is fighting.
Yeah.
You've seen it. Okay. So which one were you attempting to be the shallow depth of field?
The first one.
The first one, okay. So I think potentially, and we'll talk about this today, framing, right? So if this right here, I think this might be the subject, right?
Mhm.
This keychain. And so moving in a little bit more into the center of the frame could give your camera a little bit more ability to focus on it.
Mhm.
And then also, we do see more things in focus. It is still slightly blurry. It's not
Mhm.
100% clear, but that's also just because the nature of the frame and the lens that you're using. So, okay, I do see the shift between the two apertures though, so that's good. All right, let's, so shallow depth of field and then wide depth of field, right?
Yeah.
And guys, this is an interesting shot. So if we're talking about the four things that exist in a well-composed photo, the four things that exist are unique perspective or point of view, clearly defined subject and background, sense of simplicity, and sense of balance. This is a very unique perspective or point of view. It isn't intensified by the shallow depth of field. Where we focus on the handlebars, notice how the one where the roof is in focus as well, and we can see other things, potentially read the label on the bag. It's not as dynamic. When we shift to this one, we get something in the front of our frame. The photo feels like it's coming out at us, like it's jumping at us. And so that is a result of having that shallow depth of field. So cool. Let's just click through some more. Yeah, I think that you can see, and hopefully you guys are able to see it, how the dynamic is more intense with the shallow depth of field when we're shooting these inanimate objects, and filling the frame in this close way, because we have something in the front of our frame that again pops out at us, and then the blurry background fades to the back. So we create layers almost. All right. Awesome. Yeah, good job, Jordan. I think you're getting the hang of shifting and also your exposure. Most of these exposure is done well and evenly across each setting. And then for this is an example, guys, of the structure of the export. So each select individually on a page, and then at the end, we're gonna have the contact sheet, which is every photo that you shot for this assignment, even the ones that you didn't include in a select, and then your write-up. So this is a good example. The one thing, Jordan, that I will want to check is because your file is fairly large.
Mhm.
So I'm wondering if one thing in the export process, the image size or the resolution is a little bit off. So because these files usually should be around maybe 1.5 to 3 megabytes, and yours is about 21 megabytes. So that makes me think that the export, you're exporting them fairly large, and that will like slow down upload times and email times and stuff like that. So we'll take a look at that. All right, cool. Thank you. Okay. Let's see who's next.
I have like a question. I don't know if it's really a question. So, okay, I'm really new to like photography and I'm still getting a hang of this, and I don't think I did the assignment right just looking at everyone else's. I was gonna ask, like, we were supposed to select only 12 photos, right?
Yeah, so 6 different subjects, but for each subject, there's going to be 2 shots.
Okay, see, I'm sorry. I had a miscommunication with that. I should have emailed you. I did not do that. I just took a bunch of photos and then I picked the ones that stand out. But okay, next time I will know. I'm so sorry for that.
No, it's okay. And we'll take a look.
Confused. Okay.
Yeah, it's okay. It's okay. There's a lot of information swirling around with
It's
this.
just so new still, so it's just a little confusing, but thank you for understanding.
Yeah, definitely. All right. I think Victoria, you're up next. Okay. Okay, Victoria, tell me how the shooting process was. This was the kind of main first assignment other than a light study, but how was it?
Well, I thought it was good. My main issue is like, what should I shoot? I did like random in my apartment, but and another thing was I don't think I exported them right either, because when I put them all in the combined PDF, they were all blurry. So I'm not sure what happened there.
Okay, I do see. So the one thing that we can look at in the export is the image size and the resolution. Just make sure that you type the right number into the image size and the resolution. They look, yeah, we'll take a look at that. Because size-wise, dimension-wise, they might be okay, but we'll take a look at what you had in your export settings, and then we'll see. But from what I can see, though, just looking at these first 2 shots, let's just scroll through real quick. Okay. All right, so the first 4 shots, just looking at them, what I do see happening is a shift of your focus, but all 4 shots are still shallow depth of field. So what happens is that you've switched between either your foreground being in focus or your background being in focus. And so we have a foreground and a background when we talk about 2D design. A shallow depth of field is either one of those are in focus. The wide depth of field, so the opposite type of depth of field, is when both of those things are in focus. So for instance, in this shot, the pot in the background and the leaves in the foreground would be in focus and sharp if this was a wide depth of field. And so it's easy though to shift between, because it's just a common thing that happens. And so if we look at this one, the leaves are in focus, but the pot is out of focus. And then in this one, the pot is in focus, but the leaves are out of focus. So both of those are examples of shallow depth of field. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah, so what we would need to do is change our f-stop in between these shots. So in order to get a wider depth of field, we need to change our f-stop to a bigger number, a number like 8 or 11. But what that's going to do is going to give us a much darker photo because the opening in the lens will be smaller. So then you'll have to change other settings in the camera, like your ISO or your shutter speed. So let's just keep scrolling and just see how this went. Yeah, so same thing. The front of your frame is out of focus, back of your frame is in focus. So foreground out of focus, background in focus. And then when we go to the second shot, the background is out of focus and the foreground is in focus. Both of these are examples of shallow depth of field because only one of those two things are in focus. Let's just keep scrolling. And it looks like that's kind of how it went throughout the rest of the shots. Okay. Yeah, so I would say one important thing when you're shooting or shooting at all is having your subject in focus. So I think you did a good job with when the subject is in the frame, you got it in focus and you focused on it, you framed it, you got a good shot, you exposed your shot, etc. But I think the thing that we need to get a better grasp on is what it is to shoot with a wide depth of field. And one of the main reasons I'm having you guys change your aperture is so that you understand changing the other exposure components. But a result of changing your aperture is also going to give you a wide depth of field. So it's like two things happening at once. You're exercising two things at once. The other suggestion that I would give is to get out the house and shoot. Shoot some things outside, shoot some things that maybe aren't as recognizable, that are a little bit more kind of abstract or not telling to what they are and what their things are, because then that will add interest and intrigue in what the final shot is. So I know one of the things you mentioned is that you had difficulty figuring out what to shoot, and that is one of the challenges that come with photography is, okay, what's my subject matter? What do I shoot? And so, but I would suggest potentially even getting out. And this is for everybody because natural light's going to be your friend in this process. And getting out of your space is going to illuminate things to shoot. Okay. Thank you, Victoria. Yeah. Oh yeah. What's the question?
Because like when I was shooting, I was changing like the different settings. And so I don't know like how I changed them wrong to not get everything in focus.
So I think
on my contact sheet, I don't know if you wanted to like look at it.
Yeah, let me see real quick. I'll pull it up. So one of the things that I think, yeah, because I think you actually have your settings here. Just your shutter speed F5. Okay, so you shifted to F5. I think potentially, okay, there's a couple of things fighting against you with this situation. The plant is all at F5. 8. Okay, there's a couple in here that maybe you could have included instead of the ones in your finals. Let's just take a look real quick. So if we look at this set right here, this pillow set right here, you shot the first one at f4.5, which I think, I don't know what focal range your lens was at, but if you're not at 18, which is the widest that your lens can be, you're not going to be able to get to the biggest opening in your lens, which is 3.5. But at the same time, the light is great. In this situation, we have the daylight coming in, shallow depth of field because the front of the frame is in focus and the back of the frame is out of focus. Now you shifted to F8, f-stop of 8. But the thing is that you still have something in front of your frame very close, like this pillow right here.
Mhm.
So I do see the shift because the window is more in focus. So this one is a good example of that shift happening. These plant ones, your f-stop actually didn't change across the 3. So this is an example of all you do is shift the focus of your subject on these plant ones here. And then on these ones, the kitchen sink, your f-stop didn't change drastically enough. You went from f4 to f5. And so that is going to be not enough of a change to see a difference. Also, what I do notice, your shutter speed, because you're shooting inside, your shutter speed is very low. And that could be contributing to the blur of the photos too, because the shutter speed is kind of almost too slow at 1/25 for handheld photography. You're gonna have shake no matter what at that slow of a shutter speed. And that's because you're inside, the light is dim, and you have to put the shutter speed at that point to get light into your camera. So I think it's a combination of not changing the aperture drastically enough. Like if I look at these here, your aperture is still at f5, aperture f5, so you're not going to see a difference. This one, you shot your aperture at f14, which it's going to give you a wider shot at f14. But what we wanted to do is between 2 shots, like this one here, like this coat hanger, you want to change your aperture. And if we notice here, your aperture is still the same across the 2 shots. You've just changed the point of focus. So if we go across these 3 photos, you're focusing here, then you're focusing here, and then you're focusing in the back of the frame. So it's actually where your camera is focusing is changing rather than your actual setting is changing. So that's what it looks like. So I think it's getting a mastery of like what your camera is focusing on. So these 2 shots here, I think, again, it's where your camera is focusing, because if you notice, your f-stop is the same, but your shutter speed changes. That's why this one is darker, because the shutter speed is faster, so there's less light coming in. But nothing has happened with your f-stop. Your f-stop has stayed the same. So we're not going to see a difference in the shallow versus wide depth of field. You also, between these 2 shots, you change what you were focusing on. And I think that's the main thing that you're doing. Like every time you put your camera back down, your focus point changed in your frame. So hopefully that kind of helps to at least, you know, like what you did and a little bit of explanation of what you did and why you got the result you got.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, definitely. All right, we're chugging along. Okay, I think Annie, you're up next.
Okay.
Cool. Let me. Okay, we'll close this one. So Annie, I noticed 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay.
I have uploaded 3 files. One is
Yeah.
the write-up, and one is the all of the photos, and one is the 12 photos.
Okay, so I think we'll go back through it today. So I'm just gonna open the one up with the 12 photos. And we're gonna want to get you to the point where you have all one document, but we'll go back through it today. But
All
thank
in one
all in
document.
one document. Yeah, all in one
Okay.
document.
I
Yeah.
know how to do that.
Mhm. Okay.
I thought I should separate them. So
Yeah. And
Alright.
then the other thing is that when you upload all the shots, we want to put that into a contact sheet. So we'll go through that process again. But let me open. I have your 12 shots here. So okay. Let me just flip through real quick. Couple in the beginning. See what we got. Okay. So how was the process for you?
I was like trying to see how am I gonna get the composition right.
Mhm.
And because when I do the shallow depth of field, like I just noticed I like that way better. I
Mhm.
like to have the close shot and have the target really clear. And so I shoot a more like close one, and I kind of like it on the side with it not on the center though, because I feel
Okay.
like this way it's more pretty.
Cool. Yeah, I think you're touching on some of the things we're going to touch on today in class. One of the things I do notice is that your focal length changed between each shot. So one thing I want to point out, in order to get a wide depth of field, it doesn't mean you have to be a wide shot. Okay. And so right now you shot this, and I'm not sure what settings you were at with your aperture, but we could change this shot and change our aperture and frame it in the exact same way and get the entire background in focus.
Oh,
So
okay.
switching between shallow depth of field and wide depth of field doesn't mean you have to switch your focal length. I actually want you guys to keep your focal
The
length
same
the same
focal.
across both shots. But we're looking at it here. This is a shallow depth of field. We can see the background is blurry and out of focus. We do have more things in focus in this, but I wonder if the aperture, I'm not sure if it changed across these two shots and just the focal length changed. And then the same thing with this one, because there still is blur in the background and there's blur in this background as well. We just have our focal length changing. So I think you were changing the focal length and doing some compositional things that are great. But I'm not sure if we're seeing a change in our aperture per se. What were you doing? Were you changing the aperture?
I trying to change the aperture, but I didn't see much like big difference, so I
Mhm.
was changing the length.
Yeah, so the other thing that is going to be difficult is it is inside, and changing the aperture is going to be limiting the light that's coming in your camera. And it's just going to be tough to see a lot of drastic changes when you don't have a lot of light. And so that is one thing that potentially was like, say, fighting the result, right? And so just want to note that. Yeah, because if I look at this element here, it's in focus, the stuff in the background is out of focus. Even in the changed focal length, the same thing happens. So we're shooting with a shallow depth of field across both focal lengths and not changing the aperture much. But I think, so you're doing some things that are good with, like, say, framing and composition. But we want to see, for this particular assignment, we want to see the aperture change so that we see a difference at the same focal length. So hopefully that makes sense. Cool.
I'm trying to do that.
But I like the things that you're thinking about doing with framing and composition. You're getting there with that stuff. The other thing I would suggest again is, and I'm suggesting this to the whole class, is that these shots are going to be way more dynamic and interesting if you get out and about and get out the house and shoot. Yeah, so good job. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Rolling through. All right, Ella, I think you're up next. Okay. My computer catch up. All right, Ella, tell me a little bit about the experience.
Yeah, I also had a little bit of difficulty just kind of figuring out all the settings as I went. I ended up, because of my work schedule, I had to do it a little bit later in the day. So my natural lighting was a little bit darker. So I kind of had to work with that in terms of like setting like the ISO and everything. So for the most part, like I feel like I learned a lot doing it, like how the settings kind of interact with each other and like how I would need to like change them to kind of do that. I noticed, I guess on the ones where I had the f-stop lower, so like the object was in focus where the background wasn't as much, I feel like I was able to get better lighting or like better exposure in that. So I don't know if that was something I was doing wrong with the other ones or if that's just kind of something that happens. I tried to adjust it so that they would all have similar lightings, but those ones always seem to turn out a little bit better.
Yeah, I think, I mean, just clicking through your shots, I think you did a lot of things right, framing, or you're getting in the right direction. Your natural light it's there. I think so. What's interesting is that any natural light is good light at the end of the day. And so you were able to capture some good light. One of the things that was happening that is just part of the process is that when you were changing your aperture to a larger f-stop number, you naturally get more light. That's because the opening, naturally get less light because the opening in the lens gets smaller.
Yeah.
So less light's coming in your camera. So your other settings have to be higher. Your ISO has to be higher. Now, if you guys remember, the higher you push your ISO, you run into the realm of losing quality in your photo because ISO is an artificial adjustment. So I don't know how high you push your ISO for these, but if you went above 800, you're gonna see less quality in your photo.
Yeah.
But as far as shifting between shallow and wide depth of field, I do think you did a good job. You slightly adjusted your focal length a little bit, but I think we can see the gist of the background coming in focus. That's the whole idea. So just the note I would have is you don't have to adjust your focal length to get a wide depth of field. This shot here, I think, is one of the best examples in this set of a shallow depth of field. We can see the rim of the cup is out of focus. The ball's inside the cup in focus. And then this one, everything is in focus. We can potentially see the fabric and those type of things. The shoe as well, I think is a good example of the front of the shoe being in focus and then the back out of focus, and then the whole shoe's in focus. We can read the branding on the actual sole of the shoe. I do like your thought process of setting up the shots in a different way, and just like kind of taking something that might be a regular element, but simplifying the frame. So I think you did that well in achieving the simplification of the frame as one of the 4 things that are in a well-composed photo. So, I think, again, wide depth of field, we can see the fabric. Shallow depth of field, we can see the dynamic. And you created some layering here where there's something in the front of your frame, something in the middle of the frame, and something in the back of the frame. And we have that shift between those 3 things. So I think you might have actually discovered a great time of day to shoot because the light is not too harsh, and it is not kind of destroying the shapes. Because one thing that can happen with too much light is that you can get overexposed, you can get blown out, and then things can be too bright, and that can happen. And so there are certain times of day that are better to shoot at. Hopefully, one of the things that you guys discovered from the light study is the times of day that are better to shoot at, where you get a better photo, and where the light is more diffused naturally, and rather than being harsh like a pinpoint spotlight on your subject. So, but yeah, overall, I think good result at the end of the day, and getting shifting between the 2 settings. So good job. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, chugging along. All right, Allie, up next. Yeah, and I know, guys, with such a large class, this can take a bit critique, but I think it's valuable for me to talk through all of these different scenarios. Everybody shot something different slightly, and so everybody's gonna have, I'll have a different kind of note for everybody, but like I said, I do think it's relevant to everyone's assignment. So we just have like 4 more, and then we'll move on to the next thing.
Yeah, that
Okay.
definitely does help, especially if it's like something really new to us still. So thank you.
Okay. All right, Allie, talk to me about the process a little bit.
So I enjoyed, like, I took these ones outside, and it was easier for me to shoot the ones outside because I felt like most of the photos I took inside, like when I looked on my camera screen, like I was like, okay, these look good, but then I felt like when I got on my computer, they looked darker. So that was something that I kind of like realized, but I was just trying to get like interesting perspectives like you were talking about, and kind of like if I wasn't at a weird angle, then it wasn't something new. So that's kind of something that I tried to remember.
Cool. Let me just click through real quick. Just see, whoops. Yeah, so I think just kind of the note that I've been telling everybody is that outside is definitely going to give you the most light. It does look like at the inside ones, you have some natural light coming in. There is some stuff that we can do in Lightroom that we will get to where you can help, even bring up exposure after the fact once the photos are on your computer. So we'll get to that, but I do think you are going to get the best results outside because the natural light is most prevalent. These shots here are very interesting. I think you did a good job here of shifting in the same frame. So we can see the more of the denim in focus in this one as a wide depth of field versus this one here, that some of the denim drops to the back being out of focus. And so I think that was a good example of keeping the same frame. This one too, although it's a little bit dark, we can see how in this shot, the wood is in focus, but the fabric that's draped across it fades to the back and it gets kind of blurry. And in this shot, the wood and the fabric is in focus, both of them. And this is an interesting thing happening with the light. So actually, I like this shot. The exposure settings, those are some of the things that we can use Lightroom to bring back up some exposure. Now, I mentioned the thing about shooting plants and flowers, and it is difficult, but I think we do see a shift here where some more things are in focus and some things are out of focus. It's a unique perspective. And I think potentially, you found a way to simplify the photo with the shallow depth of field, but it still is fairly complicated with how many lines and shapes and textures are intertwining with each other versus this shot. If we look at this shot, it kind of simplifies it down to a singular pattern or two patterns that are in the frame, and we get more of a simple shot, including even this one. There's negative space, and then we have like a singular kind of hue against another hue, and so there's a simplification there. So those, I would say this set here is the strongest in the bunch. And yeah, it looks like you're working through and getting a grasp of shifting the settings and getting the exposure. Even if the exposure was fairly on the darker end, your exposure seems similar across the different shots. So that's a good thing. Yeah, so cool. Yeah, but this set here, up here, I think strongest set in the bunch. And then, as far as simplification, framing, sense of balance, clearly defined subject and background, yeah, I would say those four are the best in the bunch.
Okay, sounds good.
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. Okay. All right, Emily, you're up next. Okay, Emily, talk to me. Tell me how the shooting experience was.
I feel like it was a good experience because I got to learn like have more like okay, sorry. I feel like I got to like really try turning like with the settings a lot more than I did before, and like see how the like depth of field really works. Because like before this, I really didn't know, but I feel like this really helped me. And I think with my photos, I want to really work on like lighting more, like just getting better lighting and like placement. I feel like composition, because I think it's kind of not simplified enough. Like my photos, I kind of have a lot of things in the background, so I kind of want to work on that. But overall, I had a lot of fun and like just finding different things like around the apartment to take pictures of. So.
Cool. Let's just scroll through real quick. Okay, cool. Yeah, I think you did a good job. We definitely see the shifting between the two settings. It's pretty evident. And you did a decent job of keeping the same frame. So that's why also it's pretty evident the shift between the shallow depth of field and wide. For example, this being wide and then this one being shallow. I think some of the things like for as far as exposure goes, that's where Lightroom can come in and help us with exposure after the fact when we put the photo into the computer. So yeah, I think as far as what I'm seeing here, like your settings, you're getting the settings and the shift of the settings. Now it's about, let's work on the framing of certain things, and then also just what we're shooting, you know, and what the subject is that we're putting in front of our camera. But I think as far as the settings go, like we're seeing that shift. I like this one with being the pen like we did with the eye. And the camera can do something your eye can't do, which is have everything in focus. So I think that's a great example of that. So I think that was really great. And then also the centering on your frame, what you did here, I think is a great compositional element of using that center. And I also saw you did do the kind of introductory research on rule of thirds. So, we're going to get into that. So I think you showed the use of some of that in here. Also, this makes me really hungry. I haven't had breakfast yet. Cool. I think good job. I definitely see the progression and then see that you're getting the hang of shifting the settings. And that's great to hear that that's what happened along in the process while you were shooting. And this was a great movie.
It was so good.
If you guys haven't seen Soul, you guys should go watch Soul. Okay, cool. Thank you, Emily. Good job.
Thank you so much.
And as you guys can see, like it's a cloudy day, but sometimes the sun is peeking out and I am changing my exposure live. So you guys are seeing a result of what happens when the light changes on my camera. Because yeah, just cloudy day today. Okay. All right, let's see who's next. Okay, I don't think who's on. Let's see. Cameron, I think you're up next.
Hello.
Okay, Cameron, I think we're gonna look at how you, oh no, it opened. Okay, cool. But again, we're gonna look at your export process. I've seen this happen before. It's a weird glitch actually with Acrobat, where Acrobat, when you go to combine files, it saves it. There's a setting that's defaulted. And I saw this with another student a couple quarters ago, and this is the same issue. So we'll just need to look at your Acrobat. There's a setting that's clicked where it saves each file as an individual PDF file in what's called a package file, rather than just saving the PDF as individual pages. So it's actually a weird thing that you're doing all the steps right, but there's like a box checked. So
Okay.
we'll take a look at it, and you'll see when I share the screen, yours looks slightly different on the left-hand side. It's because all the files are saved individual PDFs in like a package file, instead of just a file. Yeah. So you see here on the left how these thumbnails look. They're not really thumbnails. And then also your file, when you try to preview it, just like by pressing spacebar or something, you can't.
Yeah, I was
Yeah.
I noticed that and I was like, what is happening?
Yeah, and I didn't even know that this was an issue. It was just something that there's a setting that's checked. So we're gonna take a look at that in the export process, because it doesn't happen till you get to that point where you're saving the PDF.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, but either way, we can still see the shots, so that's good that we're here. So describe to me the process a little bit.
So I had fun figuring out like what subjects to do, but definitely like keeping the same frame and like focal length was something I struggled with. And then switching from settings, like as it got more color and like lines with the subjects, it was kind of harder to keep like focus and like everything the same. Also, it got easier throughout shooting, because like I was playing with the settings more and I was getting more familiar with it, but otherwise I think I did pretty okay.
Cool. We're just taking a look. Because it's individual PDFs, it gives me this little pop-up every time I click on a new one. So 1 second, let me just click through and get through these pop-ups, and then we'll talk about them. As I'm clicking through, I think you did a good attempt at keeping the frame simple. I think that that's a great thing. And a note I want to point out to the class is that we want to keep our frame simple. Please keep that in mind in those compositional things. Really, those 4 things that I gave you: clearly defined subject and background, unique perspective or point of view, sense of simplicity, and sense of balance. If you achieve those 4 things, your photo will be that much better than if you don't. And it's a roadmap to getting and trying to get a good photo. Okay, so just keep that in mind. So let's go back to now. I think hopefully it'll load without that. Oh, it's gonna give me the pop-up every time. Here, let's do this.
I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. It's okay. It's my PDF. So we have a shallow depth of field here. And let me see well, actually, was this, which one were you intending to be the wide depth of field versus the shallow depth of field?
What, the first one was supposed to be the wide depth.
The wide depth of field. Okay, cool. Yeah, I think we can see the fabric a bit more in that one for sure. When I shift to this one, it kind of was evident to me that this was the shallow depth of field. I definitely see that, and we can see how this is more dynamic. We can see, again, shallow depth of field creates this layering. It almost creates a 3D effect, like the thing is coming out at you, and that's kind of what the goal is with shallow depth of field. So that's good. Let's see, between these two, I really like this framing and the contrast of the colors in this. Which one would you say is the shallow and which one's the wide?
I think the wide depth was the second one, because I feel like the first one, the one in the front was more like clear, and then the second one was like this one right here. They're both kind of blurry, but like the leaves were very like focused.
Yeah, so actually I feel like if I was just judging, on which one, this seems more shallow depth of field to me because
Yeah.
all of this is out of focus. So the size of the out of focus region gets me to think that this is shallow, shot with a wider open aperture, or that f-stop number being 3.5, because you wouldn't get so much out of focus if not, because it's such a wide area, both left to right and top and bottom. This one, now your focal length changes a bit, you punch in a bit more, and I think that is giving the illusion of shallow depth of field, because you've punched in your focus, but we do have more things in focus. This is not as blurry. These leaves are in focus. And so if we have focus across the range of the shot, then it's a little bit wider. Both of them though, still kind of employing shallow depth of field techniques. This shot here, I do see the attempt at the shift, because the Hermes logo in the back.
Yeah,
now I
that
can
one,
see a little bit more, but what I do notice is that I think you probably had to shoot with a very slow shutter speed. So there is a little bit of blur on this shot.
yeah.
So I do see the attempt at the shift, which was good, but in order to compensate for the exposure, you put your shutter speed fairly low, and then that's why we get it kind of blurry. But yeah, this one, I think the shift is the most evident. This one, I think it's kind of a little bit of an issue of what's in focus and what's not.
Mhm.
This is, do we see the shift where we shift from the foreground to the background being in focus in this
Yeah.
one? Both of those are shallow depth of field, because it's either or. With wide depth of field, it would be everything in focus. So yeah, I think those shots, I think you're getting there with, I see the shifting. I think just, you don't always have to change your focal length to shift. The settings will do it for you. And with changing your focal length, you do lose the ability to be the widest open aperture. I think we see the shift here. But I think what's happening is that again, a really slow shutter speed is creating that blur. So again, for years 2, I would stress potentially getting out the house with more light. As you can see, my light keeps changing. I keep getting dark. Thank you, clouds. Okay. All right, but overall, it looks, Cameron, like you are getting through the hang of it. We just got to change that setting in your Acrobat so you get a better exported file. Okay. All right, so let's see. And Daniela, let's take a look at your shots that you did shoot.
Okay, sounds good. No, yeah, it kind of an experiment right now. So
No, it's all
I'm
good.
I'm a little still trying to get the hang of it. So I messed up, but it's okay. I'm not being hard on myself.
It's all good. Share screen, computer's catching up. Okay. All right, so
trying to play around with different angles and stuff, because every time I searched up depth of field on the internet, there was a lot of landscape photos that had some sort of angle to them, but
okay. So I think one of the things that you did do well here, I mean, you are shooting in slightly a backlit situation. So if you notice, when you take a little bit more of an angle, you start to see some of the more details in the front. but when you're
Yeah.
shooting straight onto the light, it gets really dark in the front, and your
Mhm.
subject basically sits in shadow. So that's one thing about the backlit situation that I want to point out, that what happens with backlit situations. The other thing is like, for the depth of field, for you to really see it, we need a clearly defined subject. So in the rocks photos, your subject is clearly defined. In a shot like this, your
Mhm.
subject is not clearly defined, meaning
Okay.
we're so wide that there's so much in the frame that our eye could be focusing on anything.
Yeah.
The palm
Very
trees, the other balconies, like, it's just, so in this instance, for the most part, this class, we don't want to shoot wide landscape photos because we want to have a clearly defined subject.
Okay. Makes total more sense.
Yeah, say it again.
No, that makes total more sense. That was something I was confused about. So you clarified that really perfectly. So thank you.
Cool. Yeah. This shot here, I think, is getting to kind of like an example of the shots that we would want. It actually employs something that we haven't discussed yet, which is called juxtaposition. And what we can see is a repetition throughout the frame. So we've simplified the frame. There's literally, like, if we were to count the elements within this frame, there's like 2 to 3 elements, and that's a simplification of the frame. And this is kind of what we want, because then you can control the elements around that simplification.
Okay, so avoid like kind of landscape styled photos. Because
yeah, we want to have a subject, like one specific element that is the focus in the photo.
Okay, because when I was doing my research, all the examples are kind of like that. So, but then I saw your examples on what's it called? The classroom, I guess. Then it was like, okay, that makes sense. And then that's when I was like, oh shit, I realized I did some of that wrong. But okay, thank you.
No problem, no problem. Let me see if there's any others that we can kind of highlight here. The other thing that I want to take a look at is the way you exported. So you notice that your shots have the white border around them.
Yeah, figure that out.
So I think that has to do with the process you're taking in Lightroom to then export to this point. Also, the file is fairly big, so I think the photos are also on the larger side of things. So we'll take a look at that.
Okay, I'll make sure for like the next assignment I fix that, because I think that was also my problem on the previous assignments. So I have to go over the video again. I think I'm missing one important instruction.
Cool. All right, so taking a look at this one, this is a great example of shallow depth of field. You have the thing in the front of the frame off to the right that is in focus. The background is clearly blurred, and that simplifies the frame. So that's a great example.
When you're doing the one before the jumping.
And so then this one also is another example of shallow depth of field. I think a little bit better framing than this one, because we have more of the pot on the right hand side.
Yeah.
And so it doesn't feel as, this one kind of feels a little bit imbalanced, where it's like too far to the right. Where this one kind of feels more balanced. But again, a good example of shallow depth of field, an example of how the shallow depth of field could be wider, but you still need something in the front of the frame that is the subject.
Yeah,
right?
I think that's okay. Yeah, for sure. No, that makes total more sense.
Cool. Just clicking through.
I feel like it was just like an experiment, seeing what I could shoot, but okay. Thank you. That helps a lot.
Yeah, definitely. Getting there. One thing I will say is that your exposures are all fairly decent. So you are getting the exposure side of thing, where there's, in different scenarios, your exposure was even across different scenarios. That was that's done well.
Okay, thank you.
Definitely. Okay, Kyla, you hopped on. We're doing the reviews, so we can go through your assignment.
Okay, sorry I was late.
No, it's okay.
I couldn't get my photo. I don't know what I did last night, but I uploaded my photos onto I put them from my memory card to my hard drive, and then I think I exported them incorrectly, and I didn't realize I missed a step, and I had to do the whole thing over again. And I was just up really late trying to figure it out, but it worked out.
All good, all good. Let me share my screen real quick. All right, so I was just clicking through your shots, and I'm gonna kind of reiterate some of the things just that we've been going through with everybody's. One thing I will say is that natural light is going to be everyone's friend and your friend in this class and in this process, because just the limitations of the cameras themselves. And if we go back to just the whole premise of photography, it is that we are using light or manipulating the light, right? And so we're going to want to have as much natural light as we can. The lights inside our houses are set so that our eyes don't get tired, and so that we can be in the light for a long period of time. But the camera, how the camera sees that light is a lot darker. Our eyes are better, and we can see in that light and function better than the camera can. So that's the first thing that I see with your shots, is that we just need some more light, because you have to bump the ISO up higher, and you get a grainy noise in your shots. As far as the shallow depth of field and wide depth of field, what's going to be really difficult in this dark setting is shooting with a wide depth of field or changing your aperture to a larger f-stop number. Because by changing your aperture to a larger f-stop number, you lose light. The light, the opening in the lens gets smaller and less light comes in the camera. So then you inevitably have to bump up your ISO or shoot with a slower shutter speed, which can give you blur and also noise. So I think it was going to be difficult in these settings, in this scenario, to get a wide depth of field, because the photos are going to be so dark. But so if I click through these two shots here, what I do see is I see a shift. The frame changes a little bit, but what I see shifting potentially, do you remember if you changed your aperture between these two shots?
Yeah, I changed the aperture from, one's 13, one's 100.
Well, that's your shutter speed.
Oh, I'm sorry. Let me see. The only thing I changed, or the only thing I didn't change between these, are the ISOs. I did go by the settings that you provided in class.
Got you. So the focus that we're doing with this assignment is changing the aperture first, because the aperture controls whether or not our foreground and our background are out of focus, or if both of the foreground and the background are in focus. So just clicking through, okay. So for example, this shot here, you've achieved a shallow depth of field, meaning the foreground is in focus, the background is out of focus. The second shot in this would be this exact same framing, but the bench is in focus along with the tree in the front. In order to achieve that, our aperture setting would need to change to a larger f-stop number. And then we would need to change, in this scenario, make the ISO larger because it's dark and we don't have a lot of light. And we need to bring light into the camera. This is shallow depth of field as well. Foreground is in focus, background is out of focus. This is a wider depth of field. Your perspective and your focal length has changed, but we see the whole frame in focus. So we have a wide depth of field. That's the idea, the difference between shallow and wide. It's either the whole frame is in focus or part of the frame is in focus. And that's what we're trying to achieve. So I think one of the things it's tough, it really is tough. The darker setting, it's tough to see these differences. This is a shallow depth of field again, because the front of our frame is in focus. So that's a good job with achieving the shallow depth of field. What I would have wanted to see is this exact framing, just like this, but then the cat in the background in focus, as well as the candle in the front.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
You wanted like a side by side, the same.
Yeah, the same framing so that we can see that shift of settings, and where this was the candle stays in focus, but the cat joins it in focus. Yeah, and that would be just a shift of your aperture, but your photo is going to get much darker. And so that's where you'll have to even bump your ISO up higher than it already is. And so that's why I'm saying, like, inside in this lighting setting, it's going to be very difficult to do that with the equipment that you guys have. So some promising things here with the shallow depth of field. The good thing is that we are going to continue to shoot in shallow depth of field. But there is another assignment where it's going to be important to shoot with a wide depth of field as well. So we just want to get that shift and that change down.
I tried to do a couple, like, I think I did a few of them, like very similar framing. I just didn't choose them for my selections. So I have
Got you.
them at the bottom of the scroll. But I'm sorry, I totally spaced on that.
No, it's good. Yeah, these are actually doing more of what we wanted to do. And then I do notice here you have two sets of like, yeah, these are actually getting,
That shot was too dark. Or that whole scene I did too dark on accident.
but the way you set these shots up, I think is more in line of what we were looking to do with this assignment. So yeah, I'm seeing that shift here. And that's, yeah, that's more in line of what we're looking to do. But my biggest note to you is that it's going to be so much more rewarding even if you have more light, more natural light with your shots. Just because with not a lot of light, you're adding variables into the equation, into an equation that already has so many variables already. So yeah. Okay, cool. Thank you. Good work.
Thanks.
All right, so real quick, what I want to do is, let me actually turn this off. Okay, so what I want to do is kind of explain another compositional tool that you guys can use when you're shooting, and it will help you kind of achieve shallow depth of field as well. So that tool, and if you guys saw, I do think I kept it in there. Sometimes I miss what I keep in, but I mentioned doing some research about rule of thirds, okay? So rule of thirds is another compositional element that we can employ, or compositional exercise or tool that we can employ to frame our shot. It helps us achieve those four things. So this is a circle. We're always going back to those 4 things. Clearly defined subject and background, sense of simplicity, sense of balance, and a unique perspective or point of view. We always want to circle back around to those things, okay? So when we're talking about rule of thirds, and I'm going to pull it up real quick. Keep sharing. Sorry, everything on my computer is moving slow. Yeah, that is crazy. Okay, let me do it this way. Okay. Okay, so rule of thirds. What we're doing with rule of thirds is this idea of seeing our frame in a grid. And I'm going to show some guidelines here, and hopefully they show up on your guys' screen. Okay, can everybody see those yellow lines that just popped up on the screen? Okay, so when we're talking about rule of thirds, what happens is that we use this concept of dividing our frame into sections. Now, the reason why it's called rule of thirds is because everywhere you count, you have 3. So if you guys count the rows, there's 3. If you count the columns, there's 3. If you go diagonal, there's 3 boxes. If you go up and down, there's 3, and so on and so forth. Also, there's multiples of 3 on the screen. We have 9 boxes divided by 3, you get 3. So this is why we call this the rule of thirds, okay? So my thought bubble here is my subject. If I took a photo and my subject was here in my shot, I would say that this subject is in the upper right third. What this is that we look at the intersections of the third and we try to put our subject matter in these thirds. Annie, you mentioned that when you were shooting, you were looking to put things off center and you felt like it had more dynamic. And that was right in thinking that. The idea with the rule of thirds is that we try to give some dynamic to our shots by placing our subject in a different third. Okay, so in this instance, we have the thirds, and I can move my subject around in my thirds. There is a world where we use the center third. But in that world, we have to pay attention to the background and what's happening in that background. Now, these thirds are there to help us achieve and utilize the principles of design. And I'm going to show you some examples here in a second of the examples of these thirds in action. But that is the basis of the rule of thirds. Okay, so rule of thirds, we have this grid. It creates 3 sections everywhere we look on our screen or in our frame. And then it's about where we place our subject within that third. Okay. Now, when we think about the things that I mentioned that we should be looking for in every composed photo, so that means sense of simplicity, clearly defined subject and background, unique perspective or point of view, and a sense of balance. Rule of thirds helps us achieve those things. So let me show you guys some examples, just talk through these. And if you guys had done some research on rule of thirds, you probably found these examples as well. But I'm just going to show and talk through some of them. Okay, so if we take a look at this wolf or fox, what we see here is, one second, let me put my stuff into this. Okay, what we see here is with this wolf or fox is the thirds grid drawn onto the screen. Okay, the wolf is the subject. It's in the lower right third. But what we have in the rest of the third is negative space. That negative space creates a sense of simplicity. So we're using the negative space to simplify our frame. The other thing is that attention is drawn to the wolf because our eye scans the negative space and comes over here and goes, okay, that is the wolf. Now, what happens? A byproduct of attention being drawn to something, that allows us to have a clearly defined subject. So all of these things tie together. The negative space is helping us have a clearly defined subject. It's all working together. Let's take a look at another shot here. Okay, this is, actually I'm gonna take something a little bit smaller. Here we go. So we have this shot here. These are rocks. These rocks, I think, are actually not huge. They're like stacked rocks, like with your hand, but the perspective that this is being taken, it makes the rocks look much larger. But also notice the frame and the balance that we have created. So our subject starts in the lower right, but then it travels through thirds. And this is a possibility. We can have the traveling through thirds. That is something that we can have and create dynamic. But notice how much negative space there is in our shot that brings our attention back to our subject and creates a clearly defined subject and background. Let me find another one. I'm trying to find ones that are a bit smaller, on a smaller scale, because you can do rule of thirds with landscape, but we want to shoot and contain our world a little bit tinier. So again, another set of rocks that are set up. Our background is super blurry. We don't know what's in the background. It's a shallow depth of field. All of this negative space brings our attention to our subject, and our subject travels through the right thirds. If we didn't have this in the right third, we wouldn't have the strength of the negative space. The other thing to note is that we're not all the way to the edge with our subject. We've given some breathing room where the negative space even travels on the other side, but the majority of the negative space is over to this side of the frame, okay? Now, center third. So I mentioned, when would you use a center third? Can somebody tell me what is happening in this photo and what and how basically what the center third is achieving? What does using a center third help us achieve? It's a principle of design.
Is it balance?
This is balanced, yes, but there is a more defined principle of design happening here.
Is it symmetry?
Symmetry, yeah. So we have the same thing happening on either side of the center of the frame, symmetry. So the center third, by placing our subject in the center third, we can create symmetry. So that is an example of when we would use the center third. But oftentimes the other thirds can help us create and achieve balance. In this instance with this photo, this guy is balanced by this chair on the floor. Both of them are in different thirds at a diagonal. So that's another thing that we can use the thirds for, is to create diagonals and create balance in our frame, which is one of the things, the 4 things that exist in a well-composed photo. We need balance. And so traveling through the thirds is also something that can happen. So in this instance, while we start in the bottom left third, we finish in the center third with our negative space over here in the top right third. Our eye travels from the bottom to the top at a diagonal. So the third is not just for okay, I'm just gonna place my subject at the intersection point. It's also there it's also there where you can travel through thirds and you can create this kind of direction for the viewer's eye. Okay, this is a landscape shot, but I just want to show how the traveling through thirds can work. Our eye travels from this bottom all the way out to here. If we had the grid on the screen, we would see this traveling through the thirds. And again, negative space. Negative space is a big kind of tool that you can use to, 1, define your third, and 2, create a sense of simplicity, and then also achieve a clearly defined subject and background. And then a lot of the times, to achieve negative space, you have to take a unique perspective, as shown in this one. Now, this one is an interesting GIF. The third, it's toggling with the thirds grid on and off. But what you'll notice is that we get this negative space because of our unique perspective and our point of view. Then we also get an ability to use the negative space to define a clearly defined subject, which is the teacup. And then we get a sense of balance. And so this is an example of how all these things can help each other and help each other. In rule of thirds is really just there to help you see the frame and adjust how you see the frame. Okay. Center third. Still negative space being employed. So I have a quick exercise that I would like everybody to try to do. I think it's something that hopefully everybody can do in your current space. If you are inside, if it's nighttime where you are, if you don't have a lot of natural light, turn on all the lights that you can find. Bring a lamp closer to your table. Like, make sure you have a lot of light. I am going to basically task you guys to shoot a mug. If you have some coffee brewed or some tea, put some stuff in it. But if not, it's fine. But I would like you to, I have the photo. We're gonna try to recreate 3 shots, okay? The aerial shot with negative space. And just what we're gonna do is we're gonna move our cup in different thirds, okay? So so for example, you have a lower right third. Then I want you to take another shot in the center third. And then I want you to take another shot in, for example, the top left third. Basically, I want you to take 3 shots in 3 different thirds, but your framing is the same, okay? So, and I'm giving you the framing. I'm defining the shot for you right now, just like this one from above, okay? And I want you to just frame and put the mug in different thirds. Real simple. We're just moving in different thirds. But what I want you to try to do is control your exposure, okay? And have a dynamic shot. Again, if you have some natural light coming in on like a table, that's the best place. But if you don't, also, if you have some texture, if you have a wood table, granite countertop, something where there's a separation of color, we want to look for that, okay? But get as much light as you can in this shot so that you're controlling your shot. So we're gonna take about 25 minutes to do this, okay? To get our shot, and then we're gonna come back and hopefully try to walk through the Lightroom experience one more time with the shots that you take right now, okay? So just quick exercise, getting these shots. If you shoot more shots, it's fine. Like I said, don't like, oh, let me delete the bad ones. Just keep going until you feel like if you need to shoot every single third, shoot every single third, but the minimum is 3. And I do want to see that center third as one of those 3. But move your coffee mug in a third. This is the frame. So this is the frame that we're trying to replicate. This is the muse. We're trying to replicate this in our own way with our own mug and our own table. Okay. Any questions? Does everybody have the concept of what we're trying to shoot right now? Awesome. So we're going to give ourselves 25 minutes at the end of class to kind of go through the Lightroom settings again. So that means we'll hop back on at 10:45. Okay. But I think you guys might need a little bit longer. So we'll hop back on at 10:55. 10:55. Just give you guys an extra 10 minutes to shoot. So 10:55. Okay, cool. I will see you guys in a sec. So I'm gonna open up Lightroom. I'm gonna go to Library tab. And on the Library tab, I'm gonna go to Import. Hopefully this is somewhat familiar to you guys. Also, guys, this is just like a quick review. I'm gonna move a little bit faster than I've done in the past, just so you know. Okay, so on the left-hand side, I'm gonna find my hard drive and where I put the photos. I'm gonna find where I put the photos. So I know where I put them. I put them in the photography folder for spring and rule of thirds practice raw. I have 4 shots here. And my coffee cup moves through different thirds across the frame. I'm gonna, on the right-hand side, this is an important step. Make sure you go to file handling and add to collection, and then create a new collection for the stuff that you're importing. You wanna do this every time you import. So I named this rule of thirds practice. So I'm gonna name it rule of thirds practice, because that's what it is. I'm gonna date it because I have many of these for different quarters. And then I'm just gonna hit create. After you do that is when you come down Actually, let me move my Zoom bar out of the way. Why is it in the way? Okay. And then I'm going to come down here and hit the button import. When I do that, I'll see everything is in the way today. Okay. I'll see a progress bar at the top. It was only 4 photos, so it was pretty fast. I'm in my library section. So the default view for the library section is to see the grid view, where I see the photos in a grid. I'm going to come to my develop section here. And here are my shots. In develop, I can see them individually. Okay. So then what I'm going to do is, I'm actually going to right click on my shots. They're not in the right orientation that I would like them in. So I'm just going to rotate them real quick. Each one, I'm right clicking and I'm rotating them counterclockwise. And okay, here are my shots. I will show you one tool here in Lightroom, one of the editing tools in at your disposal in Lightroom, because we're talking about rule of thirds. That tool is right here. It's under the, it's above the basic menu on the right-hand side. So remember, you must be in the develop menu. That's an important note, that you have to be in the develop menu to see this. Then I would like you to go to the first tool in this little section here. It looks like the marquee tool from Photoshop, but what this tool actually is a crop tool. So when you click it, where? Hold on one second. Sorry. Oh, here we go. Overlay show. Okay. Sorry, a setting was changed and that was really weird. Okay, here we go. Okay, the default for this crop tool, the reason why I'm showing you this crop tool is that the default overlay that you get is the rule of thirds grid. Notice when I click on the tool, I get the grid and I can see the third that I placed my object in. The other great thing about this tool is that you can adjust before you use this tool and change the size of things. I suggest that this padlock here next to the word original, that you lock it. And what that does is it constrains proportions to the original shot. Once I have the proportions constrained, I can come in and I can change the size of my grid. I could change a photo that I originally shot in the lower left third, and I can change my photo to be center third and hit enter. And then now I've cropped in on and created a center third shot from a lower left third shot. The great thing about Lightroom is, and you'll continue to learn this, is that nothing is permanent. I can always go back to the crop tool and readjust that back to the original. So Lightroom keeps everything. It never destroys. It's not destructive. You can always go backwards. So I just wanted to show that tool. We'll learn more about tools here in the next week and how to edit things and actually do things in post after you take the photo, after you plug it into your computer. Okay, so just quickly for the time that we have now, I'm gonna go through the exporting process that I would like you guys to do. So first things first, we're gonna export all the shots individually. So we're gonna select everything down in the thumbnail area, our film strip. We're gonna right click on our selection, and then we're gonna go to export and export.
Mr. Gordon?
Yes.
Are we still supposed to be in the develop tab? Because usually we're in library.
You can do this straight from the develop tab.
Okay.
Yeah. So the thing is you want to make sure you have your film strip down at the bottom. If you do not see your film strip down at the bottom, you got to click this little triangle so that you do see your film strip down at the bottom. And then you can select everything in the film strip, even though you're only seeing one photo on the main view area. And then down here with the selection, you can just right click and you can get to the export settings after you select everything. So, but you want to make sure everything is selected because otherwise you will export one photo instead of all of them. So then we're going to hit export and then export. And this window will pop up. It should have the last thing you did. So the last naming, the last location, the last choices that you chose should pop up here. This is a new project. So I need to find a new location. So I'm in the export location, I'm gonna hit choose, and I'm gonna go find the actual location where I would like to put this new set of exports that I'm gonna do. And that location is gonna be in the project folder for this particular thing that I shot. So I'm going to navigate to that folder. Rule of thirds practice, and I'm going to make a new folder and I'm going to call it exports. And then I'm going to hit choose. Okay, so I've defined the location. Perfect. Now I'm going to change the name because this is a different name than the last thing that I shot. So I'm going to use the same naming that I've used throughout. Rule of thirds. In practice. And then I'm going to put my first name, last name. And then that's good. Just leave it at that. And then quality to 80. And this is the important part that I want to make sure that everybody does because this controls the file size of your final document. You want to have resize to fit checked, and you want to have these numbers plugged in. 1920 for the width. Oh, also you want to have width and height selected from this drop-down menu. But this is important. This section is important. 1920 for the width, 72 pixels resolution, pixels per inch. And make sure that this is in pixels. We're dealing in pixels because we're dealing with the digital shareable file. So pixels is what we want to deal with. This will help you control the file size of that final file that you turn in. So this is an important part, that this setting is set. Once we have these settings set, that's when we're going to hit export, and Lightroom will export those however many shots you have for it to export. Okay. We'll give that a sec to export. The next step, again, to refresh is the contact sheet. Some of you did it. I think I had it in my video, but I'm just going to go and breeze through it again. This is a sheet that shows all the shots on one page. Okay. And so in order to show all the shots on one page, we have to go to the print section. My computer's moving a bit slow. It's going to get there. It's just worth waiting on.
Will you upload this since it's recording?
I can upload again, but all of this is in my original video.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah. I'm just reviewing, but I did go through all these steps in the original one that I uploaded. But there are some people in class that might have missed a critique, so they aren't here today. So I'll probably upload this too as well.
All right,
all
Mr.
right.
Gordon,
Yes.
to get to where you are now, I don't remember. You're in print, the print category, and then
print tab.
And then it's just loaded. You haven't done anything.
Haven't done anything yet. Yeah.
Okay, got it.
Mm-hmm. So under the print category, on the left-hand side, we have a couple different drop-down options. One of them is called Template Browser. So when you open Template Browser, you're going to see Lightroom templates. And that's what you want to open, Lightroom templates. And the one we're going to select is the 4x5 contact sheet. This one right here. What that does is it puts your shots in this format. 4x5 contact sheet, it puts your shots in this format. Now we want to save this as a file that we can include in our combined file in Adobe Acrobat. So in order to do that, we're going to close all of the options here, except for the one labeled print job. So print job, that's the one you want to have open. And then you're going to select the printer that you're going to select is not a printer. It's not really a printer. It's a JPEG file. You're going to select JPEG file from the print to section, select a JPEG file, and you're going to change the resolution to 72. Now, the great thing is like the next time you come here, this will be set like this already. So you won't have to do this again. We're changing the resolution to 72 pixels per inch because we want to control the file size. When you're turning stuff in for digital submission, controlling the file size is the paramount thing that you want to do. So again, we selected the 4x5 template from the Lightroom templates on the left-hand side. We have all of our photos selected in our film strip. We come over to print job on the right-hand side and select JPEG file, and then change our resolution to 72. Another thing you can do to control the file size is bump the quality down from 100 to about 80. It's not necessary, but it's just another thing that you can do to ensure that this file is fairly small. Once you have those settings set, the option that's available to you down at the bottom right says print to file. So once you click that, it's going to bring up a window and ask you where you want to save it. We're going to save this right inside the same project folder. And we're just going to name it the same thing. But I'm going to amend at the end of the file name the words contact sheet, because that's what it is. It's a contact sheet.
Mr. Gordon?
Yes.
I followed everything you said, but when I went to the 4x5 contact sheet, I have like squares gridding each of my photos.
It's fine. There's a setting that you can turn off where you turn off all the lines and you turn off the details within the contact sheet. I had done that in mine for something. Don't worry about it. You can export the contact sheet with those lines.
Okay, so the only thing you changed was you went under print job and you changed the resolution to 72 PPI?
Yep, and then I also print to, the very first option, change that to JPEG file.
Print to. I have print to, oh, I see it.
Mm-hmm.
Got it. And then you went to print to file?
Yes. And then that brings up the place to save the file. And then save the file within your project folder, the same place that you saved your other exports, but name the file the same thing that you named your JPEGs, but add contact sheet at the end. So the result is this. Under exports, I have now 4 JPEGs that are the images. And then I have 1 JPEG that is my contact sheet. So everything is here individually as individual files. Now, if this was a regular assignment, also in this folder would be your write-up, whatever your writing was or whatever that writing thing is, right? But we don't have a write-up, so I'm just going to jump to Acrobat. Once you have these exports, so these are your selects, and these are your contact sheet. So remember, the contact sheet is everything. No filtering on your picking and selecting and your flagging. The contact sheet should show everything you shot, the good, the bad, the ugly, and everything. Sometimes your contact sheet, depending on how many photos you shot, will be more than 1 page. It won't show you all the pages in Lightroom. It'll just export all the pages. The Lightroom view is just a preview of what the pages will look like.
Mr. Gordon,
Yes.
sorry, I had this problem the other night too. I took the photos off my memory card and then put them onto my flash drive, dragged them to my flash drive, and then went to Lightroom with them. And now, like when I did the contact sheet, when I went to save it, or when I clicked print to save it, all of the photos are missing. And so they don't come up on my contact sheet.
Is your hard drive still plugged in?
Yeah.
Did you rename the folder or did you move them after you imported them into Lightroom?
Oh yeah, I did.
So that's the problem. Like they're missing. It's called missing. Like the location, Lightroom registers the location of the original import. If you change that location by changing the folder name or moving them outside of Lightroom, Lightroom doesn't know where they are. So what you have to do is on your film strip, there's going to be a little tiny exclamation mark in the top right-hand corner. Once you click that, it'll ask you, do you want to locate the photos? So
I don't have any exclamation marks.
There should be an exclamation mark. Let me finish this and then I'll have you show you. You see it? It's really small.
Yeah.
It's really tiny. Like you can miss it. If you click it, it's going to bring up another window and basically a prompt to locate the photo again. So once you find one photo, make sure you're finding the correct file name too, because if you find the wrong file name, you'll mess stuff up. Make sure you're finding the right file name. Once you find one photo, it'll reconnect all the rest of the photos in the folder. And then you can export your contact sheet again. Okay. Mm-hmm. Okay, guys, I know we're a little bit over, but I want to finish this out. So just bear with me.
I have a meeting at 11:30, but
Okay.
I'll stay till then if that's okay, and I could just watch it. It's recorded, right?
Yeah, I'm recording it. I'll try to upload this again.
Okay, great. Sorry about that.
Yeah, no problem, no problem. So in Acrobat, once you have all your files exported, you're going to go to the tools section in Acrobat, home tools, and then you're going to go to combine files. It's the purple tool in the first row. I like dragging and dropping, but you can also click on that blue button that says add files. But I'm going to just drag and drop into my window. Okay. Once you drag the files or you hit add files on the blue button, what you'll see is the files load in this preview window. It's basically saying, are these the files you want to combine into one Acrobat file? And if so, make sure you can also control the order of which these files are. You can move things around here by dragging and drop the order. If everything looks good, let me see, this is one thing I did want to point out. Okay, so I think it was Jordan. Somebody was having an issue with the way the file was exporting. So this is the setting that you need to change under options. You guys just want to make sure under options that save as PDF portfolio is not checked. You don't want to have this checked. It needs to be not checked. And I think only one of you had this problem. Right? And so just double check that save as PDF portfolio is not checked. It does not need to be checked. That's under options. So only way I bring that up is I think one of you, that setting is checked and it's affecting the way that this file saves. Okay. Once we have all those things set up, we're going to hit the blue button in the top right-hand corner that says combine. Also, you can always go back and add files later to a PDF. There's ways to add the file after the fact. You guys can't see it, but my computer's thinking. So just give it a sec. And when this opens, the PDF itself is going to open. It's going to show you what it created. The next step after that is we need to save the file. And that step is the last step of this process to get the file into a format that makes sense for sharing and uploading to Canvas. Okay, so finally, my slow computer did its thing. If I click the pages icon here on the left-hand side, I can see the pages, the individual pages that are in my PDF. But if we notice at the top, the file name says binder1, that's a default file name. So I need to save this file as the file name that I want to save it as. So I'm going to come here and I'm going to go to File, Save as Other. This is an important thing. Save as Other, reduced size PDF. This will again help control the file sizes that you're uploading to Canvas. Once I click that, it's going to give me a disclaimer. Before you can save a reduced file size PDF, you need to save it as a regular PDF first. So we just hit yes. I want to do that. My Finder in my instance is going to open in a sec. Man. Okay. So I'm here, I'm gonna find my folder for my project. We've done this multiple times in this process. So everything goes for a project goes in the folder for the project. It's just the organizational process. And then also everything gets named the same filing name convention that we used for all the other elements in the project. Okay, so photography, rule of thirds practice, exports. Okay, so I'm gonna name it the same thing that I had, but you can add the word final at the end if you want, or just name it rule of thirds practice, and you know that this is the final PDF that you're going to turn in. And then I'm going to hit save. Now, here's the thing. it's gonna give you some prompts after you hit save. All of the prompts, you click the positive or the yes action of that prompt. Okay, so then this prompt, the first prompt is gonna be about compatibility. You hit okay, or confirm, or yes, whatever it says in that positive section. And then it's going to ask you again, another prompt. So on your end, just hit all of the, and then you're going to get to one of them that says replace, hit replace. So everything on the positive end of the prompts. Save. And then one more, replace. And then that's it. So that is the file that you turn in. Okay. We have a single PDF with all of our images and our contact sheet in it. I will upload this class also for the critiques on the depth of field that we went through and the lesson on rule of thirds. I will open up another homework assignment that has to do with rule of thirds and then some research into the next concept that we're going to be talking about. And then, so you'll have those assets. So I'll get all that up together. So I'll export this and upload it. And then message the class in Canvas when that's uploaded.
Are we turning this into an assignment file?
Yeah, and I'll let you know about that too. I have to open it, but I would say in the meantime, try to get these saved into a single PDF and just have it ready to upload.
Thank you for that note on changing your folder name. I've done that like a few times and I've had to like restart. So
yeah, it's
really good to know.
Lightroom uses a system called referencing. And so it's not actually saving the files in Lightroom. It's only referencing the location that they are when you import. So if you change that location or unplug your hard drive or something, it's going to say, I don't know where anything is. So yeah, thank you for asking so that we could get to the bottom of it too.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right, guys, I know we went a bit over, but it was a lot of information to cover. Thank you for the effort that you're putting in, and I'll be in touch via Canvas.
Thank you so much for clarifying everything.
Definitely.
Thank
Cool.
you.
All right, guys, have a good rest of the week.
Thank you.
Thank you.